The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Triversity Talk. I am Wendy Stewart, and I am coming to you live from New York City. And I'm hoping everyone is enjoying this gorgeous spring-like. It's definitely spring-like where we are here in New York. So when I think of spring, flowers, dancing, being outside, having fun, and tonight we have a topic that I have wanted to do for a long time. I have to tell you that, and I really needed to find an expert in this area. So I'm going to share this with you. I was very fortunate through our former vice president of Triversity, Simone Krause, to be introduced to a very exceptional dancer, choreographer, and producer of an incredible film called Out from the Wings. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the film before I introduce our amazing guest. The film explores how gender and sexual identity expectations can negatively affect people in the LGBTQ plus community, both professionally and personally. And the film itself made me think, we go see dance performances and we never think about those roles really that people are playing. It's perfectly acceptable because of how we've been raised, right? The women wear the tight ballet outfits and the men wear the tights and whatever they have on top, but it's so clearly defined for so long. So my guest tonight really got me thinking too with the film, and the film is comprised of a series of wonderful interviews with people in the dance community that are LGBTQ. So I'd like you all to welcome Michael Montoya. How are you? So much for coming on tonight. Was that a good introduction?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It was fantastic.
Good. I didn't want to let you down at all. So thank you, first of all, for being here. Your film, you're a first-time filmmaker, or have you done other films?
No, this is my first time at bat making a film.
Wow. So I'm just going to jump right in. Michael, what was it about making this film that made you want to get the word out there? Creating a documentary that you base on interviews and the whole factor of the people involved and the editing of it, the craft of the documentary. You must have had something you really needed to say really bad. What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, originally, I was awarded a grant from the New York State Council on the Arts and the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable to create a series of asynchronous video lessons about an underserved community in the arts. And as a transgender dancer myself, I thought, well, we're a pretty underserved community. So I originally started with that project and interviewing the dancers, creating these lessons with the interviews to sort of drive to help instructors present and have students come to their own conclusions, listening to the dancers talk from their own personal experiences. And as I was going through and doing research and doing the interviews, I just felt so much connection with these dancers, so much that when I was actually dancing professionally, I felt so alone. I felt like maybe it was all in my head. I felt like there was just no one else like me. And as I was interviewing these dancers, it touched my heart so much that I felt like I just need to make this something that can be seen more by a broader audience. So I
Right.
re-edited the video into a full-length documentary, added the narration that I wrote myself, based on the interviews and all the research that I'd done. And I've been entering it in film festivals. I've been screening it around the country, with college groups, with civic organizations, just anywhere that I can get the word out. And it's been so wonderful to see the response from teachers saying, wow, I didn't know I was doing that. From dancers saying, wow, there's other people like me. I feel so vindicated. Sharing information on where people can find companies and teachers that teach and give more opportunities to dancers from the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, I have to say that a lot of people don't think about this, and I'm in the LGBTQ community organizations. I do a lot of different things, and what I loved about your film, you really did underline the aloneness that people go through, the isolation. And I think that is something that we have to talk about, not only in reference to you, but to other people that are out there. I was not aware, because of the world of dance, right? I had tons of gay friends in dance, but I never thought about, I didn't know that many females that were gay in dance. I knew mostly gay male dancers. And that seemed to be like you could just kind of coast in those roles there. But then I started meeting people that were trans, and I never thought about, how polarizing an experience it could be for somebody.
Definitely. And it is interesting. Again, like you mentioned, you see many gay male dancers, but with women, it's much more limiting. And because of the ostracism that lesbian dancers face, many just choose to leave the profession altogether because it's so difficult. And the expectation to appear in this hyper feminine, overly, I would say sexualized type of roles is extremely emotionally difficult. Being ostracized by other female dancers who are often uncomfortable to share dressing rooms or to partner with other females who are gender nonconforming.
And you talk about that in your film, and I never. My God, it is such a complex problem.
Yes, definitely. And for transgender and non-binary dancers, knowing where you can fit in. One thing I think is very important, and I've heard from many people watching it, is that they didn't realize, they just assumed that because gay men were accepted, everyone was.
Same here.
Not. And even with gay men, the expectation that they portray a heterosexual man on stage.
These attributes like big and strong and solid, or what they call masculine.
Exactly. This idea of what masculinity is, rather than saying, I'm a man. This is how I dance. That's how a man dances. It doesn't have to. Why does a man always have to be strong? In life, men need to be vulnerable. Everyone needs to be able to access every part of their emotions, but on stage, that's not acceptable. So it makes
me wonder how much of this, when I was watching your film, these stereotypes, right? Like what we're having this conversation about is really changing history in a big way, because historically, all right, when you look back at the history of dance, those roles were all like clearly defined. And I don't, maybe there were people questioning back then. I'm sure any time in history you could find people to question, but there wasn't any room for any kind of fluidity whatsoever. And now we've come into where we have a spectrum. I mean, on the LGBTQ, we have a spectrum. On the T, we have the spectrum on the T, and that's a biggie, because not everybody gets that. I spend a lot of time talking to people explaining that there's a spectrum on that, and I'm not a good explainer. Maybe you can coach me on how to get through to people regarding that. But we are dealing with very complex situations nowadays. I have to give a shout out here. I have my friend Hannah Q from the Hannah Q Dance Company. She's a choreographer. I have to give credit where credit is due. I love her performances because she will pair female with female, male with male. The male with male can be sexual. It's got to do with the creativity and what she brings to the work. And I think that at the end of the day, Michael, isn't that what it should be?
Oh,
What is
definitely. Definitely. I think that, and I do see, and I am really happy to see that things are opening up. Some of the companies featured in the film, one of my friends, Deborah Brockus, out in Los Angeles, some of her work is featured, where she partners two male identified dancers together. Sean Dorsey is a transgender dancer and choreographer in San Francisco, even in other companies here in New York, Ballets, Queer the Ballet, even ABT as really, I've seen in their advertisements and their promotional materials this year, seeing females together and more dancers biracial and people of color. So really expanding to look at the individual that you are working with and showing relationships that you don't have to have it attached to a gender to tell a story, to share their relationship of these two human beings, the human experience. And I really think that's what it's about.
It is the human experience. And I think, like, just in terms of dancers, who can interpret the role the best?
Yes.
Let's, not define it by, oh, I want a male for this or a female for that, and you have to fit into this. And oh, by the way, there's a costume that may make you feel uncomfortable, but we've defined this role already, so you have to wear the costume. It's interesting. One of your dancers, lesbian, who talked about when she would put on the male costume in some of the production she had to be in, she felt good. It made her feel good. You have to wonder about how many kids that are taking ballet and jazz all over the country that are being forced to wear costumes and be dancers and not feel good.
Well, and there's long-term effects. The research, there's actually research out of Columbia University that dates back very long, many decades, about what it's like. It's called minority stress theory. And when these children who are in the minority because they are gender expansive, because they may identify as queer, when they are forced to portray these roles in class or on stage, it is very stressful and it can have very long lasting effects. As I said in the film, there were two younger dancers who did not want to be interviewed on film because they were so traumatized by that experience in dance of being forced to perform in these roles that they left the arts. And that just breaks my heart because I just know how important arts education is for all children. And for a child to feel like they just don't belong and that there's no place for them. It's absolutely devastating.
Michael, what was it like for you growing up? How long, first of all, have you been dancing for?
I started dancing by way of gymnastics. I was a gymnast when I was younger, and I actually was such a poor dancer. They said, you really need to take dance. But I found that I just loved jazz dance because I found that there was more room for expression. It wasn't the form that I excelled in. I trained mostly in Giordano and Luigi style of jazz dance, where there is more, there's more fluidity. The gender roles are not as rigid. And I felt that I could be strong and powerful and female in performing in those styles. So that's how I came to dance. I began dancing professionally in my 20s, and I performed in a concert jazz company in Los Angeles as a principal dancer and a choreographer, the Jazz Spectrum Dance Company in Costa Mesa for many years. Moved to New York, and since I've been in New York, I've been teaching mostly. I've done some performing, but mostly teaching, and really moving in the direction of trying to help teachers learn how to teach in more gender neutral ways and using gender neutral terminology and and getting away from this definition of only boys do these moves and only girls do those moves, because you're really cutting in half what you can teach a dancer if you define it by their gender. Teach them everything. Teach everyone everything. It's kind of simple, I think.
I completely agree with you, but I'm also thinking, we're talking New York and Los Angeles. Like, what about the places in between? One of the women in your film talked about, I think she was teaching in Indiana, and somebody who was subbing for her ended up outing her, and then there were issues with the parents, and I mean, that is awful. And that is something I imagine does go on and is still going on. How do you deal with that? And as a dance educator, how do you see expanding people's minds in areas of this country where they're very narrow?
Well, and I think that's one of the advantages of trying to get this film screened nationwide and trying to find places and opportunities to share it in different states. I did have a great opportunity with the National Dance Educators Organization. They did a nationwide screening of my film, online screening, made it available to all their membership nationwide. So dance teachers from across the country could watch, could ask questions. They featured my blog posts on the same topic so that teachers can ask questions about it. And I think that's really how we get to them, is through dance teacher education. I've also presented this at seminars for dance and physical education teachers. So I am really trying to get to the teachers and to the parents so that the parents can advocate for their children as well.
Oh my gosh. At the end of the day, I mean, the kids need the support of their parents. Have you experienced pushback as you've been doing this?
No, so far I've had a lot of support. I think that with the teachers, they genuinely want to learn. And most of the time they just they don't know what they don't know. I've had teachers ask me questions, and I try to describe to them how to teach in a more gender neutral way. And they're always very appreciative. They always want to try new things.
So that's a real plus in general for the dance community then, no matter where you are in the country, that you've created, I'll call it a product that people can use to teach out there. It's really important. And to me, especially now in the environment that we're dealing with, this is something that's a must-have. And dance is such a beautiful way for people to be. It breaks my heart when you talk about kids that have left dance because they just weren't being treated well. They weren't being recognized, the pressure that they were under and the rules that they were forced to do. When we go to see a dance show, I don't think about those things. I'm now going to think twice about those things. Watching your film actually made me think about the Nutcracker and all the kids I've seen in the Nutcracker. And my God, that's a classic. And how that thing is cast every year, I'd like to think that there's more people in terms of casting roles that are trying to mix it up a little bit because
definitely
for a better performance.
Definitely. And, I've had some interesting conversations with teachers online on social media. I have made that exact point about the Nutcracker, and hearing more teachers discuss different ways of casting. They're saying, they might cast it by the toys the children are playing with. They might say, we need a certain number of dancers in pants and a certain number of dancers in dresses.
Right. Who wants to wear pants? Who wants to wear dresses? You get to choose. Isn't that brilliant?
Exactly. Or just by the part. And I made the point of saying, when people have holiday parties, they do not invite guests based on the gender of their children. And we always have this Nutcracker show where we have X number of girls and X number of boys, or that, this balance, rather than saying, here are some families coming to a party with their children, and this is where the children are going to dance together. And when I look at the again, the gendering of those roles, the stereotypes of even how the children behave or what they play with. And I think of all the number of children, different children who may want to play with a doll, or different children who may want to play with a drum or a trumpet, that has nothing to do with their gender. Right. So if we cast it by their preference, who wants to play this role? Who's interested in this role where you're running around with the drum? It just does not have to, it can be done in a much more creative way.
I completely agree with you. And, and I am thinking for those Nutcracker productions, what a great way to start to break in parents to thinking a certain way, and the children for thinking a certain way and not judging other kids. It really opens it up for everybody by doing, well, I come from theater and film. We call it non-traditional casting. There's probably a better name for it, but you understand what I'm saying. Where those roles are open. I have to say it's interesting because I'm not a great background in dance, other than I love to dance with no training. But when I think about the dance world compared to like the film, television, and theatrical world now, I have to say we have moved ahead. The castings are very every single day there's tons of castings, and it can be women who identify as female, transgender women, BIPOC. They just have opened up everything to everybody, and I would like to see more of that in the world of dance. Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, it would. I still see audition notices or company notices that will say male dancers wanted. And I will respond to these organizations and say, why? Why can't you have a dancer who can perform this role, period?
I'm curious, what kind of response do you get?
Crickets. They don't respond. They don't want to hear it. Although I do want to point out that with Alvin Ailey, they had a workshop, Hearts of Men workshop, that I participated in, and in their notice they made sure to identify as all who identify as male. There was something along those lines, so it did not just say male dancers. They were careful to be very inclusive in their wording. And when I attended the workshop, I let them know that made me feel welcome. And they were very pleased to hear that, because they said that was our intention. We really wanted all to feel welcome to come to this workshop. And so that really does matter, because without it, I may not have, I probably would not have signed up. I probably would have felt uncomfortable and unwelcome. But because they went to the effort to expand the definition, I stepped forward and I had a wonderful experience. I'm so glad I went.
Right. And thumbs up for Alvin Ailey. I've had a number of people on this show that have danced with Alvin Ailey. So it's great to hear this. The companies that are forward, I mean, have been doing it the last couple of years. How do we get other dance companies, do you think, on board, like the ones that you reach out to and you get crickets?
I think one thing that when I spoke to my friend Deborah Rocks about it, she said that sometimes the issue is the theaters that are booking the acts. And if they don't think they can sell tickets, they do not want to see companies with more expansive choreography. That includes queer roles. What we need to do as an audience is demand to see it. We as an audience need to demand to see ourselves represented on stage, and our allies saying we want to see our friends. We want to see all people represented on stage. The more they see that they're going to sell tickets, because that's what it comes down to, is filling the theater.
It really does at the end of the day. It's selling tickets for any show.
Right.
But
so
it's
the more
really
they see that, the more they see that, the more I do believe that companies want to expand. They really see the need to represent all people in the art of our culture.
Oh, yeah.
Once we start demanding it more, and the theater owners, and buying those tickets, showing up when your company, your favorite company has these pieces, show up, buy tickets, support them to show them that they can make it doing this type of art.
I'm wondering though about, I always jump down to Florida and what's going on there. Well, I could jump to Texas, but let's talk about those places because, you know, we have everybody along the spectrum there and there's dancers, right? What's going on in places like that in terms of, because New York and LA are one thing, but what's going on into your knowledge of getting people to buy tickets to shows that would be gender expansive?
I think that there are community organizations that are fighting. They're fighting back. They're trying to be heard. There are pockets. So, for instance, in Texas, Dallas, as I've been told, is a big blue dot in the sea of red. But there's a very strong arts community in Dallas, Texas, and organizations, nonprofit organizations that are really trying to bring these types of productions. I'm in talks right now with a nonprofit organization in Dallas to present my film in Dallas, hopefully in the coming months. So there really is a lot of effort to try and push back and really offer, you know, because there are people there that they're struggling that need to see themselves on stage too.
I agree. And this whole thing about mirror image, needing to see yourself on stage, is something that my God, it really echoes for so many people, you know, and makes people feel safe. The ones that are up there performing, it's creating a safe space on stage, which is really what we're talking about here. Well, I want to show your trailer, your wonderful trailer. So can we get the trailer queued up? Thank you.
The dance world is just, it's toxic. It's really toxic.
You know, ballet can be extremely traditional, and in those traditions, there's an expectation of gender roles and storytelling that's being played.
It is traditionally sexist, it's traditionally misogynistic, and it's traditionally discriminatory.
As a woman, I've felt pretty constrained, you know, in what I'm allowed to do, what I should do, and, you know, how I should look and all of that.
You're expected to be soft and dainty and pretty, and in some aspects as a female you're expected to be sexual, but you can't be too sexual that it's raunchy.
Going into this space not wanting to be feminine, and then acknowledging the fact that I had to be. For someone who wants to explore their gender, there's no room for it.
You had this expectation of like, if you're gonna be a male dancer, you need to look like a male dancer.
You still have to make it where it reads off as a man moving just fluidly.
I frequently find that I get sort of like pigeonholed into like hypermasculine ways of dancing, or I often am like the base for lifts.
As a socialized male dancer, ballet dancer, your job is to make them look good.
It just makes you feel like you're a prop.
You could be more grounded.
The groundedness.
Be grounded, be strong. That meant you're dancing too feminine because a man doesn't dance feminine.
And I've seen some young male dancers that are incredible on point, but there was one of those like, you don't do that.
Once specific dancers found out that I identify how I identify, you could tell that they had this subconscious hesitation or assuming that just because I present the way that I present and I identify the way that I identify, that I'm attracted to them specifically.
We've got young kids that are having to rework their brain to say, I'm trans or I'm non-binary, but then they go into a space that has no identification that way. Almost every one of my young dancers that came out to me, they don't dance anymore.
Gender is not a costume that you can throw on. It's not a character. It is very much who you are. We are not tokens. We are not your diversity quota. We don't want to be. And you shouldn't be applauded for it either, because we are human beings and we are not a handout.
Wow, gender is not a costume. That really just says it all. It's not a costume that you put on.
Oh, she had some really powerful, very powerful comments that really got to me, and I really felt that that dancer really expressed very clearly something that I know that I experienced quite a bit of, is that it's often there's often this expectation that is the responsibility of the queer dancer to make everyone else feel comfortable, to explain that, oh, I'm not attracted to you, you can trust me. The explanation and all of it, the pressure is on that individual. And it really shouldn't be that way. Yeah. I mean, we need to have space where if there is someone who is uncomfortable, that you can have a conversation with your dancers, with your company, but putting that weight on the queer dancer to say, you're making other people feel uncomfortable, so you need to fix it. When, as she said, we're just being ourselves. We shouldn't have to apologize just for being who we are and just trying to participate in dance as ourselves.
But it made me think that the more we do with educating people in this area, then she won't have to explain about herself or anybody. You know, they'll just be, and it's not me being utopian saying that. We're just all people at the end of the day. I never get this whole thing that this person's this and that person's that, and thinking people are coming on to you because of how they identify. Mm-hmm. Wow. Makes absolutely no sense at the end of the day. I think just as people, we really need to start thinking about this, treating people with respect and kindness at the end of the day, and thinking about people's feelings.
Absolutely.
You know, she was very articulate, that dancer, about, you know, and she talked about in the film, she, you know, being outed to her students, and all of a sudden it was a big issue if she was in the dressing room. I mean, that had nothing to do with anything. And yet, because of a lack of education, it had everything to do for the people that were judging her.
Oh, yes. And I experienced the same thing. When she shared that, I could definitely relate and it wasn't in every company. So I did experience that in one company, but then the next that I was with, the dancers had no issues whatsoever. I was just another member of the company. So it isn't everywhere, but yes, there are some places where there were these assumptions and people didn't want to partner with me. It was very uncomfortable. It did make things very uncomfortable.
How did Michael, how did you, I don't know how old you were when that happened. I don't want to think of you being like a child or a teen when that happened, because that's a really hard age. But were you in your 20s when that happened, and how did you deal with it?
I was in my 20s. You know, I just kept it all inside. When I went to the company director and asked questions, he lied for the dancer that didn't want to dance to me and made excuses for her and made it okay for her to not partner with me. And I just knew if I wanted to keep my spot in the company, I needed to not talk about it. I needed to swallow it. And it's very stressful.
It's very stressful, but it makes me think about, like, in the workplace, like if you're being harassed, but at one point, I know my daughter went through this. At what point do you talk about the person who's harassing you at the risk of not being believed, or think you're blowing things out of proportion, and then you're the problem, right? You're the problem, and they let you go. It's a tough one.
Yes.
You know, it's certainly a tough one.
Definitely. And that's something that another dancer, Christina, had mentioned as well, as a teacher, teaching young dancers and having worked with a young lesbian dancer who faced that problem and who eventually had severe emotional problems, was suffering from seizures from the stress of having to keep all that inside. So it can be very, very serious for these young people. And as you said, as adults, having to deal with it too. I mean, I've literally had, when complaining of sexual harassment, and this was before my gender transition, I literally had a boss tell me that he didn't believe me because he couldn't believe anybody would sexually harass me. Like, he literally said, who would sexually harass you? So that's very common, unfortunately.
Right. Experience that. Yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? We're all here trying to make things better for people. So, one question I really did want to ask you, should if a teacher be told if a child is trans?
I think that it's up to the student. I think it's up to the student. I think the teacher should allow a student to share with them what they feel comfortable with. And then for the teacher to offer, how can I help you? What would you like from me as your teacher? How can I support you? Rather than making assumptions. Because it is, a lot of time people don't even realize that I'm transgender. I don't tell everyone in every walk of life. And so for a student, they may not feel comfortable having their teacher know. Sometimes people will treat you very differently if they do know that. So I would always leave it to the individual to decide for themselves, regardless of their age. Regardless, 5-year-olds know. And this idea that young children do not know who they are is absolutely false. A 5-year-old, if they tell you I'm a boy, they are a boy.
I've seen 3-year-olds that if they tell you that, or if they tell you if they physically look male identified, but they know that they're female, they know they're female and they are female and they are going to dress female. I always think that's a slippery slope because I think as a parent, you want to protect your kid, but you also want your kid to feel comfortable. You don't want your kid ostracized by the other kids if they I talked about this with a parent with a play date. What do you do? Your kid is 4 years old and your child looks female, and I hate using the word pass for a 4-year-old, but they're accepted as female, and then the play date happens, right? And the other kid's parents don't know, and your kid, it's the first time on the play date, and all of this information is being revealed. My God, these are really complex problems.
Well, and these are things that affect gender expansive children as well.
Yes.
I've seen you have a child that wears a particular article of clothing, shoes, shirt, whatever, that someone else has decided doesn't match their gender, rather than saying, well, this is just a shirt. It's not a boy's shirt or a girl's shirt. It's a shirt. And I'm pleased to see stores like Target that are just saying, this is the children's department. These are all the children's clothes. And so I think those things are helpful, but it is tricky. And I think that being a parent that is there to 100% support your child, that's what the children needs. They're going to experience adversity in life, but when they have that solid home base, they have that solid connection to a loving, fully accepting parent, they're going to have the tools to know how to navigate the diversity, the adversity that they experience in the world. That's the most important thing, is love.
I completely agree with you. And if they come from that base, they will be able to handle, all of us in life. One thing you have to know, you have to be able to handle the things that are thrown at you. And certainly with the way the world is now, and certainly for kids with the amount that goes on the internet. I didn't have the internet growing up. We had just regular street bullies. It is a whole different thing, because there can be many more bullies on the internet than the one bully in your neighborhood. And this is what children are having to go through now. And, you think about how are they going to deal with that? Well, if the parents completely support the child, comes from a base of love, and they just have to teach them how to navigate those waters at the end of the day. So, I have a technical question. In terms of if a person transitions, so let's say I'll just talk about somebody maybe transitioning from male to female, danced a certain way as a male, transitions into a female. So we could, or maybe not be talking the surgery, but we are talking hormones. We're talking about the different things that people do to make that transition happen. And it doesn't have to be what I call the whole ball of wax. It can be pieces of it. But chemically, what hormones do to your body and how it affects it. How can it affect one's dancing, and how does one deal with that? How did you deal with that?
Well, I did have to retrain somewhat. You know, when you take hormones, there's a redistribution of muscle mass and fat in your body. And so that did affect my balance. My center of balance shifted from my hips to my shoulders, which affected my turning. When I did have gender affirming surgery, one of the muscles in my legs needed to be moved. My gracilis muscle had to be moved, and that affected me being able to do a passe with my left leg. So I've done a lot of training. I worked with a floor bar teacher to help me focus on that particular muscle area to retrain my leg.
How long did training take? Because the changes that a person has to go through is a lot to begin with. Regular people going through these changes. Now we're throwing in the whole dance thing on top of it. So your body, your whole life moved one way, and now your body's different and your chemistry is different. You know, hormones change your chemistry. How long does it take till you feel able to twirl and hold your balance?
Well, I think the important thing is dancing through the process.
Dancing through the process.
And I compare this to dancers I've known who have become mothers, and they danced through their pregnancies, and they realigned their balance and their center of gravity as their child grew inside them. And once they had the child, they had to readjust going back, because now their body had changed from carrying to no longer carrying their child within them. So there are many ways that and as children grow, like when children as they grow from being a 5 to a 6 to a 7 or 8 year old, as they are dancing through their growth, the body naturally, the changes happen so slowly that your body naturally adjusts.
Yeah,
so when you're going,
you have that option, you know, when you transition, and it's like a relearn. It's tough.
And if you encourage a dancer to stay in dance and to keep working as they're going through whatever type of transition, whether it does involve hormones or maybe it does or does not include surgery, dancing through the process, I think, is really the best way, because then that way your body is adjusting as you're moving through each of those changes.
Right. And it really defines what we call it, going with the flow, right?
Yeah.
But as you do it. So in terms of what you want to do with dance education out there, I saw, of course, the way you edited the film, you could see your whole process and talking to people. What are some points that you really want to promote in terms of dance?
I think as I finished the film, and what I really wanted to point out was the importance of making all dance available for all people, and looking at dance education from a technical standpoint, instead of using gendered terminology or even references to masculine and feminine, because from one culture to another, what is masculine or feminine is different. And trying to really encourage dance teachers, choreographers, company directors, even the dancers themselves and their parents, to look at dance as movement of the body, and that all bodies can create all qualities of movement. As teachers, share all of your knowledge with all of your students and let them decide what is right for their body, for their expression as an artist. We don't need gender in dance. It's art, it's movement. It can be different for every individual. That's really what I want them to get through, because then that way we have more children, more people are encouraged to come into dance. And that's so wonderful. I mean, art is so important to our all around education. We're not just reading and writing and arithmeticing. We need art. We need all children to participate and to enjoy, to create this love of art. It's
here,
innate.
here. I agree wholeheartedly, but you're preaching to the converted here. One of your dancers made a point in the film. One of the things the government can't get their hands on is art. They can't, they can't tell you what to do with art. Although now with what is happening with drag, and I consider drag an art form, and I always will, in certain parts of the country where they're shutting it down, that's an example of it being infiltrated on the government, trying to tell people, no, you can't express yourself this way. I guess people in those places will find other ways to take their art and perform it, or call it something.
As a teacher, Drag Queen Story Hour is excellent teaching.
Oh my God, I agree.
Excellent, amazing teaching. For how long have teachers been dressing up in costume as the characters of their stories? It makes the story more engaging. It makes the child question and want clarification and get into the plot and the story and everything. It is everything you learn to do in school to learn to teach. It's really wonderfully engaging.
I agree.
For children, it's amazing. So I encourage more of it.
Yeah, to me, I think like it can also academically help children that you expose to hearing stories read by someone in drag with expression, because a lot of people that do drag, they do have a theatrical background, and if they don't, the act of drag makes them theatrical. And what could be better than telling a story looking like that to little children, engaging them? Those children will leave there and they will remember the story.
Yes, absolutely. You're 100% correct. It's
made
so
such a big impact. Oh my God. Yeah. You underline in the film, one of the things you said, I thought was a brilliant analogy about anyone who plays an instrument that's genderless. You can be any gender and play any instrument. That is a brilliant analogy. I didn't think about that until I saw that in your film. And so why not dance? Why can't we do this with dance?
Absolutely. Music is genderless. And when you learn to play music, all of the cues, they're very specific. Sforzato, pianissimo, fortissimo, all of them are very specific about the sound quality, and it has nothing to do with gender. And the same is true of dance. There is dance terminology that has been developed to provide the exact same types of cues for movement qualities. We just don't use them. So it really can be done, and it needs to be done.
Right. Yeah. And it absolutely needs to be done. Well, we're on our last, pardon my pun, dance legs here. And what would you like to share with people? I would like you to share your handles, your blog and everything, and anything that you want to say. This is your moment.
Oh, thank you. Well, if people want to find me on Instagram, I am at mmontoya605. On YouTube, it's Michael Montoya 8259. If you're interested in more information about the film and screenings, I usually post it on Instagram, but you can also email me at montoyamichael139@gmail.com. If people are interested in scheduling screenings of the film, I'm always open to that. Anything to really get this message out and to support dancers, dance teachers, supporting parents and knowing how to advocate for their children. So definitely all dance for all people. That's my goal.
Absolutely. And you do Q&As also for your films, right? If you do the screening, you do the Q&A also. And do you ever have any of your dancers that were in the film? Do they ever join you? I'm a big Q&A person. I always stay for them after the documentary. I love that.
Yes, I always do Q&As. The dancers have not joined me. They are from all over the country. Some of them, I think one was in Florida, California, Indiana. I mean, they're all over the place. So I have not had the opportunity to get us all together. That would be wonderful.
Wouldn't that be good? Well, I want to thank you for creating this wonderful film. My wheels are turning in my head. I actually have someone that I am going to get in touch with as soon as this is over up in Connecticut. She runs a dance school, and she's transgender. And I think she would absolutely, I'd love to, I really want to get your film out there. It really needs to be communicated what's going on and how we can make people feel safe. I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I always take my parting photo. So you have to say cheese. I love shooting on the computer. But thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us here today. And please let me know if you're doing any screenings in the tri-state area. I will try and rally up people, and I will certainly come myself.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in for taking the time to spend the evening with us.
Right. Absolutely. And if in case you missed this, of course, everything is recorded and the link is on the Triversity channel on YouTube. It'll be also on Wendy Stewart TV and on Facebook Live. It's on our Triversity channel. Thank you, everybody. Great show. Thank you, Michael. Be well.
Thank you,
Good night, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.